Queen by name, king of DC by game. Is Derik Queen the pick at 6? Find out next on Locked On Wizards.
You are Locked On Wizards, your daily Washington Wizards podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome into Locked On Wizards, where myself and Abdullah Ayubi, we analyze the game and potential of the DMV's own Derik Queen as a potential candidate to be picked at number 6 by the Washington Wizards. I'm Leif, Thulin, a credentialed NBA draft analyst, attendee of the last 2 NBA combines, host of Locked On NBA Big Board, and beside me is Abdullah Ayubi, diehard Wizards fan, here to provide hometown insights and passion for his beloved Wizards, and here to tell you today if Derik Queen's a good pick at 6. Thank you for making Locked On Wizards your first listen each and every day. And remember, Locked On Wizards is free and available on all platforms, including YouTube at Locked On Wizards, where the best way to help us grow is to comment anything below. And today's question that we'll try to engage with you is, do you think Derik Queen's a good pick? But also, what's the best case scenario for Derik Queen? So engage with us there. We'll try to talk with you about our reasons in this, and we'll try to look at the comments and say, we agree with your point or we disagree with your point. So let's dive right in, Abdullah. And you've talked a lot about Derik Queen as a potential top option at pick 6. What exactly appeals to you about Queen, and what's the contentedness level, 1 through 10 for you if he is the pick at number 6 overall?
Yeah, so Derik Queen, kid from Baltimore, B-more kid, just like our very own Bub Carrington, went to Montverde Academy, played with Cooper Flagg, so he's been playing on the big stage for all of his life and playing at Maryland, the Big Ten, had a really good year his freshman year. And I think it was Big Ten Freshman of the Year. For a guy like him, post scoring, I mean, his footwork is elite in the paint. Kind of reminds me of a mix of Alperen Şengün and Naz Reid. His ability to make a move after catching the ball is just really quick. His size, 6'9", 6'10". His ability to be the guy that say, hey, I want to take that last shot, hit that game winner in the March Madness tournament that sent Maryland to Sweet 16. That's the stuff that I like to see, stepping up in the biggest stages of college basketball in March Madness. So a guy like him, pairing him up with potentially Alex Sarr would be really, really awesome. A front court where we haven't really seen here much in DC in so long. Very dynamic. I mean, they could definitely dominate the paint. They could very much complement each other. So DQ, man, and just the name itself, Derik Queen, it fits, it checks off a lot of boxes. I think his game is going to translate well in the NBA, and I think he's going to be there at 6. For me, right now, I'm still stuck in between Trey Johnson and Derik Queen. If Trey Johnson's off the board, Derik Queen, you have to run to the podium and get him at 6. And I love it, man. Again, a guy like him with Alex Sarr could definitely do wonders. And rebounding. The Wizards have been a bottom 5 team in rebounding for the past so many years. I can't count it on my fingers, but a guy like Derik Queen will definitely impact you in rebounding. And I think he's going to make his presence known come his first game as a rookie.
Well, his first game at Maryland, he had 22 points and 20 rebounds. So no issues there translating from high school to the Big Ten. And like you said, freshman of the year, first team all conference in a league that was very, very good. He's the guy to me that I have number 6 on my board. So right there, slotted in where the Wizards draft. That's not a mock draft. I do think, though, that the top 5 will be in some order: Cooper Flagg, Dylan Harper, Ace Bailey, VJ Edgecombe, and Trey Johnson, leaving the best available according to my board and the best available according to you as Derik Queen. We're going to touch about some of his upside, the fit with the Wizards we touched on already, how he and Alex Sarr could form a very formidable front court. But let's talk about just why he's a polarizing prospect a little bit, because Derik Queen scored a ton and he rebounded very well. He had a rebounding rate that was alarming in the Big Ten. He played against bruisers in an older conference and dominated. He's skilled. He hit a game winner. All those things you referenced that are good. I think the reason he's polarizing is because he's not fleet of foot. But there have been guys that have not been very quick. There have been guys that aren't tremendous vertical rim protectors that have thrived in the NBA in recent years. And I think this is kind of a archetype thing. People don't typically buy into this until it happens. Think of Nikola Jokic, went to 41st. Alperen Şengün probably fell too far, and he fell to 16th. You mentioned a guy, Naz Reid, I hadn't really thought of as a comparison, but I don't mind that comparison. I think he's a better shooter than Queen is at this juncture, and he went undrafted, so that furthers the point here. The people with the super skillful bigs that aren't particularly vertically defensive threats, those guys have fallen. Even Sabonis fell outside the top 10. This is a guy who's perennially putting up 20, 10, and 5. So is it just the archetype, or is there a reason that people are nervous about Derik Queen?
Yeah, I think I would say again, maybe like a lot of people think that the quickness isn't there. Maybe he doesn't have the most athletic big man. I mean, again, there's arguments of Malua. I mean, him as a defensive guy, definitely leaning towards him more than Queen. But I think Queen can get there defensively. And again, I don't think he has to be an elite defender because you have a guy in Alex Sarr, a 7-footer in frame, who's going to be there in the front court. And again, it goes back to them complementing each other. We're going to talk about it later on in the episode, but I don't think there's a lot to worry about Derik Queen. I think shooting wise, I know you mentioned that Nas Reed is better, but he's going to improve on that. And I think definitely as a playmaker, he's up there as a big man. Again, to be able to play make at that size, it's kind of hard to get in today's NBA. And obviously there are the Alperen Şengüns in the world, Nas Reed, but a guy like him just really haven't had that type of big here in Washington. We're hoping that Alex Sarr can be that big, but if you bring in another guy that can shoot it from three, pass the ball, be a menace off the glass, I mean, look out for DQ in Washington.
Yeah, and I think athleticism is becoming, in a way, overrated in the NBA. Obviously, the league's trending to be more athletic than it was 20 years ago, and there's more versatile players. We've talked about versatility being an asset and something that's needed, but I think skill is almost being overlooked in favor of athleticism, and there needs to be a equal and appropriate reaction to that. So, speaking of athleticism, Derik Queen, the reason people are a little bit cautious about his defensive upside, and I tend to agree with them that he's not going to be a very good defender. I think he can improve, but I don't think he'll ever be a very good NBA defender. It's because he has a 28-inch max vertical. He has only a 9'1.5" standing reach, which isn't terrible, and a 7'1.5" wingspan to complement his 6'9" frame. He's a little, and that's without shoes, the 6'9" frame. So for those of you who are like, oh, it says he's 6'10", I'm well aware he's 6'10.5" with shoes apparently, and 6'9" without. But the point of that is, I think that Washington is uniquely equipped to handle those deficiencies, and what he brings in terms of the productivity on the glass and offensive threat is well worth the risk there. And in terms of skill set, just like we've talked about what he does well in the big moment, how he's thrived. He dominated on one of the best teams in high school history in Montverde with Cooper Flagg and many other talented players, Liam McNeely, Asa Newell, all likely to go in the top 20, along with Rob Wright, who we talked about actually ironically yesterday, who's getting $3 million from BYU in his sophomore year. So what I want to bring up is, what does he do well particularly? Is it all on the block because he only shoots 20%? But it feels like the touch is pretty solid. The free throw percentage, which is usually the indicator that's best trusted. His free throw numbers are pretty good. His touch is good. What I love most is he's just patient and knows where to go with the ball, both with when he's scoring, he finds angles and like almost like Zach Randolph way back in the day, bully ball, gets into your body, scores. He can overwhelm smaller defenders. Bigger defenders don't bother him with length. He gets where he wants. Is that what appeals to you, or is there something that you really see and you say, man, the Wizards can't pass up on this? Because you said run to the podium.
No, you hit the nail on the coffin right there. I think a guy like his skill set, being able to dominate in the paint, is one thing. But I think also the fact that he's just so young, Leif. I mean, again, he's doing that as a freshman in college basketball in the Big Ten and showing up in the big moments saying, yo, give me the ball. I'm going to hit this game winner off the glass for the win. March Madness, doing it under the bright lights. That's what I always emphasize when it comes to these draft prospects. Obviously, what you do in the regular season in college basketball is important, but how do you do when the lights are the brightest? And when he had that game winner, definitely boosted his draft stock. And why not bring him home? I mean, Baltimore, DMV, all in all, I think it fits perfectly. And again, at 6 is a guy who you don't have to trade up for. We think he's going to be there at 6. So I think it's starting to fit well that if Trey Johnson goes before 6, I think DQ is the guy that you just have to take at 6 and pair him up with Sarr, with this young core that you have here in Washington. And eventually, I think year 2 or year 3, he could eventually be that all-star, that forward that we just haven't had here in so long here in DC.
I agree. And I'm looking at some stats here, and this will bring to light for you guys. Look, so the simple numbers is he averages 16.5 points, 9 rebounds per game, 2 assists, 1 block, 1 steal. That's excellent no matter how you spin it. But this is a freshman. So those of you who say, oh, wait a minute, he's 20 years old, like he's too old to be a freshman. I do believe in that a little bit, but not when you're as dominant as a freshman. Like his first time college basketball, that he was in college basketball, he scored 22 and 20. And then he's carried throughout the entire season against the Big Ten, showed up in the biggest moments, like Abdullah said. And then he had a usage rate of 26.6. That's absurdly high. Like you do not see him. You don't see prospects that are freshmen have it above 20 just about ever, but especially post players, because college is here's the guard dribbling up the floor. Let's feed the big, but the guard's going to have it for 80% of the possession. No, that's crazy. That talks to his skill set. And he's also able to bring the ball up the floor. He's able to pass with either hand. He's very dexterous. He's a good finisher at the rim, draws a lot of fouls. He shot 6.1 free throws per game. But for those of you who are more decimal inclined, 54.6 free throw attempt rate. That's very impressive. And he's someone that, though he doesn't have vertical pop, does find a way to score on the interior at a high clip. So I think all those concerns are fair, but more on the defensive end than those people saying offensively. I don't know if I see it translating to the NBA. I think at every level, he's been at the utmost of efficiency. Like you look at what he is at high school and college, he's extremely efficient and carrying an enormous load, a far larger load in college than he even did in high school. And that bodes well, in my opinion.
Yeah, I was going to say one more thing. I think with him, the fact that he was the number one option in Maryland, it's not like Cooper Flags of the world, the other college prospects, or Ace Bailey Harper, where a lot of teams are also focused on the other player because he's also a top caliber player. All the attention's on Derik Queen. They know the ball was going to go to him, but he still found a way to dominate, still found a way to be that presence. And all the game planning was on him, but still be able to go out there and ball out, getting Maryland to the Sweet 16. We put all that together, 20-year-old freshman, I mean, talk about age, it is what it is. He's still a young guy. He's definitely going to be a lot of room for improvement.
Absolutely. Speaking of improvement, we're going to talk about his upside, what he could be if he does improve those things and hones in on what are already strengths, as well as just the floor. What's the floor? What's the upside? What is he going to be for the Washington Wizards? Can he be an all-star? All that and more ahead on Locked On Wizards. NBA fans, you know what time it is. It's playoff season, which means big performances and even bigger rewards. DoorDash is bringing the heat with a slam dunk deal for Dash Pass members during the 2025 NBA playoffs. It's called They Swoosh, You Score. Anytime a player drops 50 or more points in a playoff game, Dash Pass members score a free 3-piece crispy tenders combo from Wingstop the very next day. So just place an order of $20 or more and use the code WINGSTOP50 at checkout, and that combo is yours. Crispy, delicious, and totally free. Offer valid noon to midnight the day after the game. Terms apply. And also, imagine being rewarded with free food just because someone went off for 50. One, it's awesome to watch because we love basketball. Well, now you can have that not be imagination, but reality. And I wish this was around when Jamal Murray and Donovan Mitchell were trading 50 pieces back in the bubble, and I certainly would have capitalized. But you guys don't have to make it a wish. You can make it reality. When someone scores 50, take advantage of this spectacular deal. So here's the play. Sign up for Dash Pass to unlock this and more exclusive deals all season long, all playoffs long, when any player scores 50 plus in a playoff game. Dash Pass members can grab a 3-piece crispy tenders combo from Wingstop the next day with a $20+ order and code WINGSTOP50. That's Dash Pass, your door to more savings, more flavor, and more ways to win. Terms apply. Well, that made me hungry, Abdullah. We talk about some sensational deals. I don't know if Derik Queen's going to score 50 in a playoff game, but we're going to talk about him and what he's going to do in the scope of the playoffs in the next day. But right now, we're going to talk about his upside. Is he someone who can score 50 in the playoffs? Is he someone who can be the top scorer in a playoff series? Is he someone who can duel with the best bigs in the East? What is the expectation for Derik Queen if he's in the on the Washington Wizards roster, and where is he in terms of the hierarchy of best player on the Wizards roster 4 years into his career?
Yeah, so that's interesting. I think a guy like Derik Queen, 50 points, I mean, again, it may take some time for him to develop that scoring ability because it's hard to get those 50-point consistent scores in today's NBA. I mean, a lot of people are scoring a lot, but especially as a big, I can see more of the 2020 side where he's dominating, but also getting dominating points-wise, but also dominating rebounding-wise. And again, in 4 years, I'm not saying it could be potentially a DeMarcus Cousins and Anthony Davis type of situation when they were in the New Orleans Pelicans.
Ooh, I like that.
I know it's a little too soon because, again, like Alex Sarr needs to develop, and if the Wizards do draft Derik Queen, he needs to develop as well. But it's just the guy. A big reason why I bring that comparison up is because how they complement each other. I really, really think, Leif, that DQ and Alex Sarr can complement each other really, really well, and they're going to be developing around the same time. So that year 3, year 4 a timeline, hopefully Alex Sarr hits that stride of being that top 10 center that we think he can be, being more of a big body. And I think those guys, there's no reason why we should get out rebounded every night if DQ and Alex Sarr are in the game. I think they need to be more aggressive if those two are put together. And again, defensively, I think this team will get better. And alongside guys, you have Keyshawn George, Bilal Coulibaly. So it's not just offensively. We talk about his offensive game being a menace in the paint, but I think defensively it helps you out a lot as well. So if you're the Wizards, a guy like DQ, I think all-star year 2, maybe even as early as year 3 potentially. But just know, I feel like his year 1 is going to be making that impact ASAP, and I can't wait. And if he's on this team, and again, I can't wait to see we're looking ahead. I'm looking ahead right now, but to see how the summer league team looks with how many young guys you have on this team, it's going to be exciting, man. And DQ is definitely be a guy that can definitely be the cornerstone of your franchise.
Yeah, Derik Queen's got that appeal of being an offensive hub. Maybe that's an overused term, but I initially started hearing it when it was like Kelly Olynyk or someone of that regard who comes off the bench and you say, oh, that's a good passing big man. So let's come up with a fun term for them being a secondary facilitator on a second unit. Well, he's the type that seems more like Alperen Şengün. You give him the ball 15 feet away from the basket, let him make some decisions, let him use his dancing bear tendencies where he's got beautiful footwork in the post, can create, got good touch around the basket. And then if you combine and you double, you see too many bodies coming towards him, he makes the right read, spits it out to open shooters. And I think that's a guy who can be integral to the success. So if we're talking about the high-end outcome here, you talked about all-star and you talked about the numbers he could put up in a playoff series, which obviously those are hopeful, they're wishful, because all of these are when we're talking about ceiling. What do you think a medium level outcome is, or if you want to give an outline for what you think the high end outcome is in terms of statistical projections? Just take me through your expectations of what a regular season of Derik Queen by year 3, year 4 looks like for the Wizards.
Yeah, so I think numbers wise, man, and you're asking as if like what the floors can be if come year 3, year 4.
Yeah, give me both. So I didn't ask it for the first one, so that's on me. But yeah, just give me your idea of like how many is he averaging? 17 and 8? Like, is that it, or is it better than that if he's touching the all-star numbers? And then if he's hitting the floor, like what does the floor look like? Because we were talking the high end before that.
No, I mean if he's that all-star guy that I think he can be, I think 22 and 10 at least, and I think floor wise maybe like I say like 14, 15. And 8. I think that's where I just feel like his game definitely is going to translate well just because he's so dominant in the paint. And I think eventually he's going to have to improve on that 3-point shooting, but mid-range shooting. And the mid-range shot is all kind of almost there. But again, it's going to take some improvement. A lot of guys come into the league needing improving on their jump shot, and they get better throughout the course of their career. So I definitely see the floor. But again, the ceiling is I like it. I really like it. And again, it goes back to there's not that much pressure on him being that number 1 option here right now in DC. Again, you already have a guy like Bub Carrington, JP13. I mean, who knows if he's still on the roster? Keyshawn George, Alex Sarr, a lot of good young guys that can come off the bench. So it's not that much pressure on DQ, and that's what makes the situation even better for him to come to DC.
Yeah, I do think that part matters because sometimes people have the weight of the world on their shoulders, and the expectation causes people to say, oh, they're not performing up to the level that we drafted them at the 6th pick. But I think the Wizards, though they were in line to be a top 1, top 2 pick based on their record, have more pieces there, and they turn into ancillary pieces, but maybe they are key, crucial parts to the core, and they can develop together as opposed to having it all rely on the shoulders of Derik Queen in this case. So I do think his floor is probably someone who's a contributor, maybe the very bottom floor, you'd say, that guy's off the bench and he's an offensive hub, like of the ilk of a Kelly Olynyk. It's done differently, but someone who is an effective, respected role player, and he's offensively inclined as opposed to a defensive stopper, which many bigs are. They're energy and rim protectors. He's going to be an offensive guy. I do think that he can score double digits early in his career. I think he can do it often in his career. So take me through your biggest concerns. Like if Derik Queen does not turn out well, what happened?
Worst case scenario, I think maybe the offensively the jump shot mechanics. I mean, again, if that doesn't, I think he can definitely improve on it. But that's one. I mean, we saw that one thing with Johnny Davis. I mean, sorry to scar some Wizards fans, but a big thing about him was his jump shot, and it just kept changing it throughout the course of his tenure in Washington. So maybe that could be the problem with DQ. I mean, a guy who maybe is too aggressive. I know with young guys, a lot of shots are taken and also inefficiency goes up. So maybe that could be the reason why. I think also maybe athletically he doesn't match well, but we talked about how it's just kind of overrated in today's NBA, but maybe he can't keep up with a lot of the guys that he's guarding. Who knows? I'm thinking of worst case scenarios. I'm hoping none of this happens. I'm knocking on wood here, but I definitely think that could potentially happen. But knowing a guy like DQ, the fact that the number one option in Maryland and being able to take all that spotlight and go out there and produce in the biggest stage of college basketball, I just think that cons or some of the stuff that we have to maybe be concerned about is going to be thrown out the window come year 1, year 2 of his career.
Yeah, I think you have to temper expectations because most players defensively come in are pretty inept defensively. I do think the biggest thing that goes wrong is something we're going to talk about next. If in a defensive series where you need some stops and you also need him on the floor, if Alex Sarr can't stretch the floor and Derik Queen can't stretch the floor, can you play both together? And can you have his defensive ineptitude with Sarr's potential lack of spacing? That's the worst case scenario to me. We're going to discuss that potential scenario, but also could he be a lead guy on a playoff series for the Wizards? So we're going to look at the game from the playoff perspective, what these teams that are thriving right now, the Thunder, the Pacers, these teams that are playing well, we're going to say, how does that affect how you perceive Derik Queen as a draft pick? Coming up next, all ahead on Locked On Wizards. Welcome back to Locked On Wizards. Leif, Thulin, Abdullah, Ayubi with you. So as mentioned before, I've been evaluating prospects for a long time. I've been doing this on the Locked On NBA Big Board. And one of the things I like to do come draft season is I watch the playoffs as all basketball fans do. And I say, man, this player reminds me of this guy. Not necessarily one-to-one comparisons, but I say that's the role I can see them playing when their team makes the playoff. And I say this particularly about lottery picks, because lottery picks you expect to be guys that play a lot in the playoffs once that team is good enough to make it there. So Derik Queen, no different. We take him at 6 with the Wizards, and he's playing next to Alex Sarr. That's the vision. You mentioned Anthony Davis, Boogie Cousins, obviously. That would be absolutely ideal, and I'm not holding you to that as the comparison, but that would be the extreme on one end. The extreme on the other is the one I was outlining before the break. Is there a world where you fear that Alex Sarr doesn't shoot it well enough to complement Derik Queen playing on the interior, and this team plays two bigs, kind of more of a college style of where they try to bash on the inside and get too many rebounds? Like Derik Queen's accustomed to that because he played with Julian Reese, who couldn't shoot at all, but it made it difficult. And that's part of the appeal for Derik Queen is with more NBA spacing that he's going to have more space to work. If doubles come, he's going to pick them apart, whereas he had to do it all by himself. Is there a concern for you there? Because that's my biggest concern. Defensively, he's not great. I think Alex Sarr covers that. But offensively, that Sarr's not great, and that causes issues.
Yeah, no, I think with Alex Sarr, one thing I will say, and from where his tenure started in that summer league game to now in Washington, it's gotten a lot better. I do think he's still settling for a lot of threes. There was a common theme that we saw in his rookie year. But again, one thing we have to realize as Wizards fans is that he was playing in the Australian League, and it's quite the transition going from the Australian League to the NBA. And I think year 2 under his belt, hopefully, I think you put him in the summer league because, again, maybe you could still develop and learn something. But if you're the Wizards, I don't think you should be so worried about Alex Sarr. I think he's going to get better. I think that was one thing that we saw throughout his rookie season, that he got better from game 1 to game 82, whether or not it was offensively or defensively. He was going out there and getting better in a lot of categories. And I think it's going to take some time for the offensive game to develop. One thing I've always been harping on for a while is that I want him to be like a Kevin Garnett type of guy where he can play in the post, but also can shoot it, pick and rolls, isn't settling for a lot of threes, knows how to balance his offensive game, gets his bag deeper. So again, could that be a problem? Potentially, but I think those two guys, and Sarr and Queen, are just so fundamentally sound. I think they're going to complement each other really well, and that problem may not happen. And again, you brought up the fact that the spacing wasn't that much good at Maryland. So the fact that you give DQ an opportunity here in Washington in the NBA where it's spacing is better, just makes it more sweet about why he should be that pick at 6.
Yeah, and I was saying that as a worst case scenario when we were talking about that the last segment. And in the playoffs, I think that stuff does matter. Like you watch what the Rockets did, and they had Alperen Şengün. So I do think there is a similarity there. So let's say Derik Queen's Alperen Şengün. They tried playing Jabari Smith as a 4. They tried playing Tari Eason as an undersized 4. But honestly, their most effective lineup was when Steven Adams played alongside Alperen Şengün, and or Steven Adams was the big protecting the rim because they would punish teams in the glass. You've mentioned the glass numerous times as a deficiency for the Wizards, as something that you want to be strengthened. So that's possible. But I also think in the NBA, there's zigging when other teams zag. So small ball happens. Now there's teams playing big. There's more and more teams that you see playing two bigs. You look at what the Timberwolves did last year, and it was Rudy Gobert and Karl Anthony Towns. Like Rudy was the defensive anchor, and Karl Anthony Towns spaced the floor on offense. I think that's the vision, and the vision then becomes that Derik Queen is the guy you go to offensively to be the primary initiator, not as ball handler, like that's Bub Carrington, that's Jordan Poole at this point. But let's see who it is down the road. But he's the guy that kind of orchestrates the offense once you're in the half court and helps set things up because of his presence, draws 2 defenders, and you play 5-on-4. And that's what the NBA is about, is taking advantage when you create advantages. And Derik Queen can create an advantage with his sublime footwork and just overall skill set of being able to put the ball in the basket from various spots. So that's what I also think is the upside for his playoff ceiling and maybe just expectation. Because I think if he's a starter in the NBA, which I do think is very likely, I think in the playoffs, he's a guy who thrives because the game slows down. It's about getting a bucket. And that's what it's always going to be about. It's about scoring difficult points because you see teams that shoot a ton of threes. Sometimes the three doesn't fall. How do you score in the interior? I think Derik Queen solves a lot of those questions that will be asked eventually for the Washington Wizards.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think if you bring in a guy like DQ at 6 and maybe pick 18, you get a guy that can be plug and play. I mean, you saw last year with Keyshawn George, you got him at pick 24, and he contributed his rookie year. You have a really good young core in the NBA. I mean, we brought up the conversation, the top 5, top 3. Obviously, we have to see how it pans out. But then on top of that, you also have the 2026 draft class. We made a video about that. I think dream scenario, which would be awesome if you somehow land Trey Johnson at 6 and you could potentially trade back into that first round, that lottery selection, and get a guy like Derik Queen. That really gives you a really good opportunity at the best young core in the league, or potential best young core in the league, because you got a guy like Trey Johnson. We're already so high on Bub Carrington. The Alex Sarr will be better, and DQ now. I mean, again, it's just the youth movement in Washington, man. I love it, and you bring in a guy like DQ is only going to make it more sweet.
I mean, talk about winning the draft. Like, maybe we should do an episode on just dream scenarios and how that's possible, because Derik Queen, if he doesn't go 6, which is the highest I can see him going, I don't necessarily think he's picked at 7 or 8 either, because those teams have players in similar positions. Yes, maybe teams don't go need dependent. Maybe they go best player available and they view Queen as such. But there's also guys like Jeremiah Fears. There's an upside pick in Kama Malawatch that we've also discussed as being a potentially high floor guy just because of his defensive upside. So there's a world he falls into that 9, 10, 11 range. And there are teams that could be willing to trade. You mentioned the Rockets as a possible trade destination with Jordan Poole. Maybe that's part of it. Maybe it's just trying to get in there because the Rockets have a ton of young players. They don't need a 10th pick of the draft as much as some other teams do. So that's a possibility. And if Trey Johnson's there, I would be stunned. So I want to preface that. He would be the best case scenario. But the outline you just laid out has me salivating, and I think all Wizards fans should be. If that's the case, I do think the Wizards perpetuate themselves into that top 5, into maybe that top 3, 4 of your best young cores. Let's say they don't get Trey Johnson. They do get Derik Queen at 6. Does that elevate them at all in that top 5 cores for you? Because I laid out mine. I had the Spurs, OKC, and Houston all ahead, and I laid out a couple that are on similar terrain. Do they leapfrog some teams if they get Derik Queen?
I think so. I think Derik Queen's offensive game is just so polished. I think his ability to score within the paint is, I feel like offensive game from 3 is only going to get better. Mid-range shot is there also, and I think his ability, his high IQ at such a young age is one thing to harp on. But I also wanted to ask you, if Trey Johnson and DQ are both there at 6, what do you think you do there, Leif?
Yeah, I run to the podium and take Trey Johnson because I think Trey Johnson's the 3rd best player in this class. I've been doing a lot of scouting, and I watched Trey Johnson. I think he's the best shooter that will go in the first round. And you may say, wait a minute, there's Con Knipple. And I thought you were pitching how good of a shooter he is. He's a great shooter. I just think Trey Johnson's a better shooter. Like when he's off the ball, he's insane. I watched every single possession in which he shot an off-ball 3 where he's coming off screens, and his shot is absolutely money. It looks reminiscent of that of Devin Booker at Kentucky. If those of you who watch a lot of college basketball are listening, you may think, oh, Devin Booker at Kentucky came off the bench. But when he was in, he was potent. He would come off screens and splash the ball. But instead, he didn't have the role Devin Booker had. He had those starring role. He scored 20 per game in the SEC with a team that couldn't shoot the ball and had no spacing around him. So he manufactured ways for himself to score. I think he's a more polished player at this point than Ace Bailey. Ace Bailey may have the highest upside because of size, and we talked about that about AJ DeBonsa. Size, you can't teach size and skill, and Ace Bailey certainly got a boatload of that. But Trey Johnson, to me, is better at this juncture, and so that's why I feel very confident that he will not get to 6. But if he does, I would sprint to the podium.
Yeah, no, for me, I'm also leaning towards Trey Johnson. But then that brings up the fact that you mentioned Derik Queen could be passed up on at 7 and 8. So if you're the Wizards, you get Johnson at 6. Do you automatically think about trading back into that lottery to get a guy like DQ or maybe potentially Malo Watch? But I think for me, I'm favoring a lot of DQ. I know, again, the Malo Watch's potential defensively is really, really up there. And again, he played at Duke with Cooper Flag, Tyrese Proctor with a lot of talent. But I think one thing I'll keep emphasizing on Queen is that he was the number one option. All the game planning was on him, except during the brightest lights. So do you potentially go back in the lottery and trade up for a guy like DQ?
I would, because I think Derik Queen's one of 6 guys in this class that I think could be an all-star. And if you can get 2 of those guys, particularly if you can get one of them at 10, then you got to go for it. I'm a best player available at all times type of guy. And it also fits a need for you. Like you've talked about Danny Wolf being one of your favorite options at 18. So if you were to be able to get a guy who is younger than Danny Wolf and was better in college in the same league, one of them was first team, one of them was not. So for those of you who are pro Danny Wolf, maybe you'll be right. Maybe he ends up being a better pro, but at the same level, the same league, a younger player, 1 year of college experience versus 4, Derik Queen was more productive. If you're talking needs, Derik Queen fits that. And if you're talking upside, I think he's got the best upside outside of that top 5 I've outlined. So I'm all the way there. Well, let's talk about Malo Watch a little bit in an upcoming episode this week and do a little bit of a deep dive for those of you who are believing in the defensive side. You want to become a monstrous defensive tandem with Alex Sarr and Common Malo Watch. The length would be incredible. You guys probably won't give up any buckets once those two develop. So we're going to talk about Common Malo Watch in the weeks to come. But thank you guys for listening. As always, thank you for making Locked On Wizards your first listen today. And for your second listen, check out Locked On NBA Game Night. Every game, every night until an NBA champion is crowned. And we're getting close. The Thunder are up 3-1. The Pacers are up 2-1 at the moment that we're recording. Might be up 3-1, could be 2-2. But nonetheless, get the local analysis on a national scale and find NBA Game Night on Locked On NBA on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. So thank you guys for listening. We are out, and we sincerely appreciate your guys' support.